Good morning. Today we're going to be thinking about the way in which the European Union tries to control product safety and manage product liability within the single market. The European single market includes the 27 member states of the European Union. It obviously now excludes the UK, with the exception of Northern Ireland, which remains within the single market under the Northern Ireland Protocol. But the single market also includes the 4 members of EFTA: Norway, Switzerland, Liechtenstein and Iceland. These countries are not part of the European Union, but they operate within the European Free Trade Area, which has a mutual recognition agreements with the European Union so that goods can flow freely across the full single market. And they've adopted the European regulations and regulatory framework. The benefit of the single market is that it allows the free movement of goods within the market based on the requirement that they meet the essential requirements. So the principle is that if goods meet the essential requirements for health and safety, they can move freely around the European single market, and that the member states cannot impose other arbitrary requirements to favour their local domestic producers. So what do we mean by the essential requirements? Well, the essential requirements are defined in the European Directives and European Regulations, which stipulate and require that goods satisfy very specific requirements. So when you look at things like the Machinery Directive, for example, it will tell you that if the machine has certain characteristics, it also needs certain safety features incorporated in the product. The problem, of course, is how do we know that the products circulating within the market actually satisfy those requirements? So there's a system of conformity assessment and certification that allows us to put the CE mark on a product to say that this product satisfies the essential requirements of the European Union. That process of assessment sometimes can be undertaken by the producer. So the producer can mark their own homework and say, we know that this product meets the European standard. For products which are more complex and which are perceived to be a higher risk, they are required to be certified by an independent third party, what we call a certification body. Now, we also need to think about the process of market surveillance. So market surveillance is the process by which we try and prevent goods which don't comply with the requirements getting into the market. So how do we make sure that people aren't putting onto the market goods which are unsafe? And also, how do we respond and react when we discover a problem with goods that have already been supplied? That's what the process of market surveillance is concerned with, and that is controlled by various pieces of European regulation. So how do we know if a product has met the standard of safety? And you may rely on your own internal standards and procedures. If you have a simple product, you may be able to just use your own methods and say, we know that's good enough. We may look to find industry standards where a group of technical experts have sat down and written a document that says, as an industry, we believe that you can test a product in this way, and when you get a positive result, you then know that it meets the requirements. But it's just a group of people from the industry who've come together to write a standard because they want to commonize how they do things. It's obviously better than just using your own internal procedures, but it's not guaranteed that it meets the legal requirement. So sometimes the people in the industry have come together and we've written a national standard. It may be a French standard or a German standard where we've agreed that this is a good way of assessing the safety of the product and measuring how the product performs. But of course, you may find that the French or the German experts have agreed a slightly different standard. So there can be differences between the national standards, and that causes some confusion and difficulty. But it's still not guaranteed that you've met the essential health and safety requirements. It's good evidence. It shows that you've tried to achieve it, but it doesn't guarantee that you've achieved that standard. We may go to what we call a harmonized standard. So a harmonized standard is where the European standardization bodies, the French, the Germans, the Italians, have come together and said, let's agree on the best way of performing this test or the best way of assessing the safety of a product in these circumstances. And they've developed a common standard. So at least all the experts within Europe have agreed how you can assess the safety of the product. So we can use the evidence that we have to try and demonstrate compliance with the essential requirements. But that has to be justified by the evidence that the method we're using achieves the objective. So the regulators who review the work that we've done can challenge it and say they don't think it's good enough. They don't think it confirms that you've met the essential requirements. So to address this problem, we have what we call another level of standard, which is where a standard has been requested by the European Union to assess the performance of products against particular essential requirements. So the standard has been developed for a purpose to establish whether or not a standard has been met or a standard of safety has been achieved. And we refer to these as the harmonized standards, which have been listed in the official journal of the European Union. So the official journal of the European Union is a register of documents that have been issued by the European Union, approved by the European Union, and are recognized within the legal framework. And the harmonized standards are listed in the official journal of the European Union. So to fall into that category, it has to have been requested by the European Union. So they've said to the standard making bodies, the industry experts, we need a way of assessing whether or not this requirement has been met. It has to have been agreed by all the European standard making bodies, and then it is recognized by the European Commission as being fit for purpose. It gives sufficient confidence in the results. And if we can get a standard that's been published in the European Journal, then we can presume that it gives us a meaningful result. So the individual regulators cannot then come along and say, I don't think that method of testing or that standard is good enough. They might question whether or not you've performed the test correctly, but the presumption is that if you've achieved a pass in the test process using those standards that have been recognized in the European Journal, that you have achieved the level of safety that is required to satisfy the essential requirements. And that obviously raises the question, how do we know what those standards are and those methods are? And the answer is we can go and look in the European Journal. So you can go online, you can submit a regulation, and it will give you a list of the standards which have been approved as a way of demonstrating compliance with that standard. And then we can use those. We have to use them intelligently, of course, to make sure that we are getting meaningful results. And if we are then able to put the CE mark on the product, that allows us to sell the product anywhere within the single market, to move it across borders without any technical limits on whether or not the product is safe to sell in those markets. And the member states of the European Union can't introduce any additional regulations that conflict with the requirements, the essential requirements for health and safety stipulated by the European Union. Thank you. I hope you found that useful.